It's Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. Hello, and welcome to Monster Mondays. I am Geoff Firebuckle, co-host of the podcast Film Seizure, that you can catch each Wednesday at filmseizure.com or at a number of podcast providers online. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. That's the refrain you either need to say or, well, refrain from saying to solve a problem with pesky living folks. It's also what you need to say to conjure up this new episode. 1988's Beetlejuice was the first significant box office hit for young 30-year-old Tim Burton. It was almost one of those blank check types of movies that directors get after they make a splash with audiences. In Burton's case, it was 1985's Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Paul Reubens' silly, childlike man, Pee-wee Herman, was already a successful stage show. Warner Brothers saw something in that and wanted to bring him to the big screen. Now, mind you, this was before the immensely popular Pee-wee's Playhouse show, where he only became more popular among kids my age. Now, Reubens was riding a big wave of successful ventures, especially with his Pee-wee character, and as Warner Brothers was setting their plans for Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Reubens was seeking his own director to help him bring this to life. Now, someone who got this fantastical world of Pee-wee Herman was what he was really looking for. And Reubens was at a party when he heard about this guy named Tim Burton. And after screening Burton's 1984 short film, Frankenweenie, and talking to his friend Shelley Duvall, who worked on the short film, Reubens knew that Burton was the pick for directing Pee-wee's jump to the big screen. Now, while Pee-wee's Big Adventure was positively received and grossed about 6 times its $7 million budget, that's pretty good for a first-time director with vision and working for a major studio. So this was going to lead to bigger things. And over the course of the next year, the cult classic status of Big Adventure and the success of Pee-wee's Playhouse on Saturday mornings, more and more people were seeking out, renting, and buying this film. So Burton was basically on his way from this point forward. His next green-lit project would be 1988's Beetlejuice. Now, Beetlejuice, also a Warner Brothers release, was actually not Burton's next project that he went to work on. No, after Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Burton worked with writer Sam Hamm on Batman. Now, Warner was more than happy to work with Burton on another project, but was not so sure about greenlighting Batman. I mean, this is kind of a big deal for Warner Brothers, who owned DC Comics. It wasn't exactly something they wanted to dive right in with this kind of untested director. Now, Burton struggled to find something from the studio that he wanted to make, but knew a guy named Michael McDowell who wrote an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents that Burton directed. McDowell and his writing partner, Larry Wilson, had a script for Beetlejuice that was much darker and a little less comedic. Now, Burton reworked the script with McDowell and another writer, Warren Scarron, who basically came along to put the finishing touches on the movie. And with a budget of $15 million this time, and surprisingly only $1 million of it was given over to special effects, Burton wanted the film to look a little more like the creature feature B movies he grew up watching. So he used a lot of stop motion animation, which is just fantastic in this, and a lot of really great prosthetics for his ghouls. Now, the makeup for this movie would go on to win an Oscar. Now, the vision and script were a bit strange, and that would prove to be difficult for Burton to get many people to really want to sign on to the project. Surprisingly, Catherine O'Hara of SCTV fame was actually an early signee and was the first person to really commit to this, to play Delia Dietz. But it took some time to get several of the other pieces into place on the acting side. Of course, there was Jeffrey Jones, who was a pretty popular 80s character actor who would go on to work with Burton a few more times. He would have some controversies later in his career. But Winona Ryder was cast over the runner-up Alyssa Milano for teenager Lydia Dietz after Burton watched the coming-of-age movie Lucas that she was in. A lesser-known at the time, Alec Baldwin and Geena Davis. Now, Davis likely best known at the time for The Fly, and being, part of that whole thing, and Jeff Goldblum's partner at the time. She would end up winning an Oscar for her other 1988 film, The Accidental Tourist. Now, they were brought in to play Adam and Barbara Maitland, the happily married couple who has a fateful outing in their small Connecticut town. But it was the role of Beetlejuice that maybe became the most fateful and inspired thing about this whole movie. Originally, Tim Burton wanted Sammy Davis Jr. That's a interesting choice, but producers actually liked Dudley Moore or Sam Kinison more. Kinison I could actually kind of see in this role, but the head of the production company making this movie, the Geffen Company, suggested that maybe Michael Keaton would be the right person for this. And Keaton was a bankable comedic actor of the 80s, but Burton was not very aware of his work. And after doing some quick research and looking at a couple of Keaton's films, Burton was convinced he was the right guy. And of course, the success of this movie led to Burton getting his Batman movie in 1989 with Michael Keaton recontextualizing the characters of Batman and Bruce Wayne for many a young boy like myself. What's kind of interesting also is that you would have thought the Batman would have gone into production before the release of Beetlejuice in the spring of 1988. That's not the case. Batman didn't go into production until the end of 1988, and it was after the success of this movie that really got that one greenlit. Batman's production actually ended just about 3 or 3.5 months before its release. So really getting close to not making its summer of 1989 release date. It's kind of amazing that the movie got done and was as good as it was for that. But that's a whole other story about Batman. But Beetlejuice is 100% the movie that got Batman made, and certainly got Michael Keaton cast as Bruce Wayne and Batman. But we'll definitely talk a little more about Keaton, Baldwin, and Davis later. But for now, let's pick apart Beetlejuice and take a trip to the underworld. And I'm going to guess that most people listening to the show have seen Beetlejuice, so I doubt I really need to get too deep into the plot part like I normally do with these episodes, but here goes anyway. In a small town in Connecticut, we meet a couple played by Alec Baldwin and Geena Davis, the Maitlands, as I mentioned earlier, and they own a hardware store in this small valley village. Now, Adam has two passions outside of his wife, Barbara. He loves Caribbean music and has a near perfect recreation of the entire town in the attic of their beautiful hilltop house. Now, the couple are celebrating a vacation that they plan to just spend at home and work on various projects around the house. Barbara is very keen on designing the house to have that perfect aesthetic for this kind of rural Connecticut feel. And the look of the house and all of that kind of plays into that. Now, after shooing away a local real estate agent who really wants to sell their house for big money, especially since the house is pretty big for a couple who have tried again and again and failed again and again to build a family. But anyway, Adam needs to pick up a couple of things at his store for his model, and Barbara accompanies him. And as they cross the wooden bridge that to head out of town, Barbara has to swerve to miss a dog walking on the bridge, causing them to wreck and fall into the creek below. Now, when they get home, they find a fire in the fireplace burning that was not burning when they left. Adam notes that they actually don't remember how they got home, so he tries to go outside to retrace their steps. And he gets transported to a strange interdimensional sand world that is guarded by a giant sand worm that comes out and tries to gobble people up. Now, when he's pulled back inside by Barbara, she says that he was gone for 2 hours by her perception of time, which was only seconds by Adam's perception. So she shows him a book that she discovered sitting on the end table called The Handbook for the Recently Deceased. I always like the joke that when Adam first picks it up and reads the title, he says The Handbook for the Recently Diseased. I don't know why that always struck me as funny, especially as a kid, but whatever. Barbara recognizes that they maybe did not survive the accident. Now, shortly after their death, the house is sold to Charles and Delia Dietz. Charles has a daughter who is goth-inspired and the inspiration of many a Halloween costume for cool chicks, Lydia. Now, the Dietzes are the exact opposite of the Maitlands. As Otho, the foppish interior designer of the Dietzes, and Delia tour the house and try to figure out what they will change about the Maitlands' beloved home, Barbara and Adam try to haunt the place by ripping their faces off and walking around without their heads, but the inexperienced dead couple are unable to effectively make anyone see or sense them. The Maitlands, desperate to keep something of their own, make the attic their own and block the Dietzes from getting into it. And they find an advertisement for a bio-exorcist named Beetlejuice, but it's spelled like the star Beetlejuice. And as they try to figure out what to do about the Dietzes, Lydia is taking pictures around the outside of the home, and she actually sees the couple looking out the attic window. And Lydia ultimately gets the skeleton key from the real estate agent and tries to get into the attic. And while the Maitlands try to keep her out, Beetlejuice transmits a commercial to their attic TV advertising for his services once again. Now, seeking help, the Maitlands use the handbook to go into the afterlife to speak to their personal caseworker, a scruffy-voiced older lady with a slit throat named Juno. And Juno tells them that they do not want the help of this Beetle guy. In fact, don't even speak his name. And while they are speaking to Juno, Lydia was able to get into the attic and really kind of learns and understands something about the Maitlands. And she actually is quite taken by this model of the city. And when the Maitlands return to the material world, it is 3 months later, and they attempt to scare the Dietzes out themselves on the suggestion of Juno. And Lydia is the only one who seems to interact with them, but in a friendly way. She tells them that she read the handbook, and it said that the living tend to ignore the strange and unusual, and she herself is strange and unusual. The Maitlands recruit Lydia to help them get their house back, and when that fails, Barbara spots a glowing sign in the model in the cemetery and speaks Beetlejuice's name 3 times, which transports them into the model where they meet the bio-exorcist himself, and he is a bit much. So much so that Barbara refuses to expose Lydia to this guy who, as she puts it, is a pervert. So they try again to scare the Dietzes out themselves. And at a dinner party, they make the 2 Dietz adults and their guests dance to Harry Belafonte's Deo and attack them with their giant prawns in their dish in front of them, turning into monster hands. And they think they are successful, but actually, they make the Dietzes more interested in the ghost than ever before. But when the Maitlands refuse to appear before them, Delia is angered. Otho finds the handbook and ends up taking it, studying it so that he knows how to basically control them. Beetlejuice tries his hand and attacks Delia, Charles, and Otho by transforming himself into a giant snake. And before Beetlejuice attacks Lydia, Barbara sends him back by saying his name once again 3 times. But this was a truly scary experience, and Lydia believes that the Maitlands actually sent this thing after them and wants nothing to do with them anymore. Now, Juno scolds the Maitlands for allowing Lydia to take pictures of them, calling Beetlejuice and Otho stealing the handbook. She tells them that the living cannot know about the existence of an afterlife. And she tells them to get rid of the Dietzes by any means necessary. And while Lydia plans her own suicide, she tries to communicate with the Maitlands only to find Beetlejuice, who tries to trick her into bringing him out so that she can be with the Maitlands in the afterlife. But The couple return from the afterlife just in time to stop her from saying his name 3 times, and Barbara tells Lydia that being dead actually doesn't make existence any easier. Now, while the Maitlands refuse to show themselves to the Dietzes or their city friends, Ortho has his own way of forcing the Maitlands out with the handbook that will force them to appear and give them physical bodies, which will ultimately start to decompose and exorcise them. And they learned in the afterlife that exorcism is essentially death for the dead. Now, Ortho can't stop what he started, so Lydia, desperate to save her friends, calls on Beetlejuice, and he says that he will help her, but in exchange she has to marry him. And she basically agrees, and Beetlejuice rises out of the model of the city, and he basically takes over everything. He brings Delia's weird postmodern sculptures to life to hold Charles and Delia captive. He makes Otho run away by changing his clothes into a polyester leisure suit, which again, he's foppish, so that's just not suitable for him, so he runs away scared. The guests are sent away when he first arrived and turned into a carnival high striker game. And then he starts the marriage ceremony, or as he starts this marriage ceremony to Lydia, the Maitlands begin to recompose, where they ultimately send Beetlejuice to hell by Adam using a car from his model to distract Beetlejuice, and Barbara going outside, getting on top of a sandworm and busting into the house to basically gobble up Beetlejuice and send him into the netherworld. Now, well settled into the town, the Dietzes have turned the house back to the way it was, and the Maitlands help Lydia with school, where they all live happily together. And in the afterlife, Beetlejuice is forced to wait to be served in the waiting room. And when he swaps the number he has assigned with an African witch doctor who can shrink heads, he gets his comeuppance and ponders if his new tiny head might be a good look for him going forward. Now, let's exercise 3 things I like about 1988's Beetlejuice. First, there's this kind of sweetness to the Maitland side of the story. For one, Alec Baldwin and Geena Davis are incredibly likable in this. They are kind of nerdy and sort of naive with small town sensibilities. Naturally, this is all a perfect clash to the Dietzes, who are big city types, who are into postmodern art, and at least Delia is a self-absorbed asshole. Although I would kind of say that Charles is kind of, I don't know, he's kind of aloof. So, you know, he's kind of a doofus, but she's particularly kind of unlikable. But specifically, I've always adored Adam and Barbara as characters. You get in just a couple of minutes at the beginning that they really do love each other. They love being around each other. It's like they've never left the honeymoon phase of their relationship. And in a movie that fills up quickly with kind of unlikable characters like Delia Dietz, Otho, and the main villain Beetlejuice, they are an anchor to really kind of latch on to. I always remember they are the leads of this movie, along with Winona Ryder, who is also very likable, but I often forget how sweet Alec Baldwin as Adam and Geena Davis as Barbara really are in the movie. Second, I love absolutely everything in the afterlife and all the stuff that relates to the ghosts and demons or whatever. It's this kind of, particularly in the afterlife, there's this kind of wonderful bureaucracy where there's this waiting room, and only a certain number of times that they can ask for help in the 125 years they're told that they're left to roam the physical world in a sort of purgatory state. There's a German expressionist style in the hallways and things that relate to Beetlejuice directly. All the different dead people, like the chain smoker who is burnt to a crisp. Presumably he died by falling asleep with a cigarette and burned in bed. But I like that he offers a cigarette to Adam, and then he's like, I'm trying to quit myself, but he can't stop smoking. And of course his corpse is actually smoking physically. But then you get the shrunken head big game hunter, the guy who runs along a track who works at the afterlife because he's been flattened by a truck. So he's hoisted up on this pulley system that runs him through the hallways. I love it. Juno has the slit throat that and has the smoke from her cigarettes come through her wound. I like that she gets the mood lighting when telling the story of her old partner Beetlejuice. I also like how the Maitlands even react to the mood lighting when they are listening to the story. My favorite creature in this whole movie is actually the little goblin that comes out to officiate Beetlejuice and Lydia's wedding. I've always wondered what he was when he was alive. Was he an alien? Because he kind of looks like an alien. Was he just a deformed guy? Or was he a demon of some sort? Or is this what happened to him after he died? If he was normal, he was just a normal guy, and then he became this after years and years and years in the afterlife. I don't know. I just love the little guy. But we also shouldn't forget the other part of the afterlife, the sandy area, which I think they say is meant to be a moon of Saturn, which is a weird kind of thing to kind of throw out there in the middle of all these other weird things that almost exist on a different concept. But the stop motion sandworm is just so much fun. It's a setting and a design that is so fully realized by Tim Burton that has this kind of perfect mix of strange, ugly, but also beautiful. And sadly, I feel that the same place in last year's sequel, Beetlejuice, was just ugly. This movie came during a time in Tim Burton's directorial career, and it's kind of his greatest era of creativity when he was perfectly able to blend his strangeness with a visually appealing art design that really honestly could only be found in this 80s era of movies. It's a perfect culmination of all of those things. But third, of course, it's Michael Keaton. From the first time we hear him, we know that this is going to be a pretty great character. His first actual appearance in the movie plays out like an old style used car salesman commercial where he's dressed as a cowboy. And at the end of the commercial, he dances around and sings the song that says, "I'll eat anything you want me to eat. I'll swallow anything you want me to swallow, but come on down and I'll chew on a dog." There's just so many lines of Keaton's that are memorable and quotable, like it's showtime, or when he talks about seeing The Exorcist like over 100 times, and it keeps getting funnier every time he sees it. It's just memorable and quotable, and he really makes it that way. It's likely a perfect combination of well-scripted lines for an instantly well fleshed out character, no pun intended, and Keaton knowing the character well enough to ad lib some bits as well. It's a part that could very easily become very annoying if not handled well, but Keaton knows how far he can take it. Burton knows how far to let him go, and Baldwin and Davis work well opposite him. Keaton was already popular for his earlier comedic roles, particularly in Mr. Mom and Gung Ho and Night Shift. But this would be one of two roles that he would become a superstar for. Now, the other, of course, is a year later as Batman for Tim Burton once again. But that wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. You can catch new episodes of Monster Mondays each Monday at FilmSeizure.com. Don't forget to follow Film Seizure at Facebook, Threads, Instagram, and Blue Sky. You can also subscribe to Film Seizure to get both the Film Seizure podcast and Monster Mondays at your favorite podcast providers, as well as YouTube. You can also check out my website, bmovieanima.com, to read new reviews every Friday morning. Next time, I have more demons to deal with, but these are the outer space, extra-dimensional kind in Paul Anderson's Event Horizon. Until next week, stay spooky.